She always said she didn't want much. She said it the first time her son mentioned marriage, and she said it again when dates were discussed, and again when plans started to feel real. Each time her voice carried the same careful tone, measured, controlled, almost humble. "I don't need anything," she said. "I'm simple. Just keep me informed." At first, no one questioned it. Why would they? It sounded reasonable, kind even, like a woman who understood her place in a changing world. But what no one realized, not her son, not the bride, not even the mother herself, was that those words weren't a boundary. They were a test. When her son announced the engagement, she hugged him tightly, a little too tightly. She smiled and congratulated the bride. She praised her manners, her education, her calm voice. She told relatives she was happy, proud even. But that same night, alone in her room, she replayed every detail in her head. How quickly everything was happening, how confidently the bride spoke, how easily her son agreed with her. She told herself it was normal. This was how life worked. Children grew up, they married, parents stepped back. Still, something didn't sit right. As weeks passed, conversations about the wedding increased, but not around her. Plans were made in small pockets of discussion she wasn't part of. Venues were visited, budgets were discussed, family meetings happened without her presence. She heard about them afterward, casually, as if they were minor details. "Oh, by the way, we booked the hall. We finalized the guest list. We decided on a date." Each sentence landed softly but left a bruise. She didn't interrupt, she didn't protest, she smiled and nodded and said, "That's nice." Inside, she told herself, "They didn't think of me." Not because they were busy, but because she didn't matter enough. She reminded herself that she wasn't contributing financially. She had made that clear early on. Her income barely covered her needs. She had no savings to offer toward a lavish wedding. "I don't want you to feel burdened," she had said. "Do whatever you want." They listened. They assumed she meant it. What they didn't see was the quiet shift that happened the moment they stopped asking. Because in her mind, being consulted wasn't about money, it was about recognition. She had imagined phone calls, small questions, moments where her opinion would be sought, not because it would change anything, but because it mattered. Instead, she felt invisible. She started comparing herself to the bride's mother. That woman seemed to be everywhere, at fittings, at tastings, at meetings. Her opinions were heard, her suggestions discussed, sometimes accepted, sometimes not, but always acknowledged. The difference gnawed at her. They have money, she thought. That's why they're involved. She never said this out loud, not yet, but the idea rooted itself deep inside her chest. Money meant relevance, contribution meant power, and without either, she was just there. She began to look for proof that she was being excluded, and once you start looking for proof, you always find it. She noticed how the bride spoke confidently about decisions already made. She noticed how her son defended those decisions without hesitation. She noticed how no one asked her what she thought anymore. When she mentioned it gently, just a small comment here and there, it was brushed off. "Oh, we didn't think you'd be interested. We assumed you were okay with whatever. You said you didn't want to be involved." Those words hurt more than open rejection because they turned her own sentence against her. So she stopped mentioning it directly. Instead, she started making remarks, small ones, carefully placed. "I suppose weddings are different these days. I guess mothers-in-law don't have much of a role anymore. It's fine. I know I'm not really needed." The bride noticed the tone, but didn't know how to respond. She reassured her, thanked her, tried to include her in safe, limited ways. But the mother didn't want safety, she wanted importance. And that couldn't be handled. The resentment didn't arrive loudly. It didn't come with shouting or slammed doors or dramatic accusations. It settled in quietly, like dust in the corners of a room no one thought to clean. She began replaying old memories in her mind, moments from her son's childhood that suddenly took on new meaning. Late nights waiting for him to come home, extra shifts she took when money was tight, times she went without things she wanted so he could have what he needed. Back then, those sacrifices had felt natural, necessary. She had never expected applause. But now, with the wedding approaching, those memories started to feel less like love and more like proof. I gave everything, she thought, and this is what it amounts to. She watched her son change in small ways. He was still respectful, still affectionate, but he was busier. His phone calls were shorter, his visits less frequent. When she asked him to stop by, he checked with the bride first. That detail hurt more than she admitted. Once, she had been the first person he consulted, the default, the center. Now, she was part of the schedule. She told herself this was normal. People always said marriage changed things. Still, knowing something intellectually didn't make it easier emotionally. So she began testing the boundaries. She would call during planning meetings, pretending she didn't know they were busy. She would ask questions she already knew the answers to, just to see how patient he sounded. She would bring up concerns late at night when she knew he was tired. Each interaction became a small experiment. And when he didn't respond the way she hoped, when he sounded distracted or gently firm, she felt it as confirmation. He's slipping away. She began voicing her feelings, but never directly. Instead of saying, "I feel left out," she said, "I suppose you don't need me anymore." Instead of saying, "I'm afraid of losing you," she said, "Ever since she came into your life, everything is different." The bride became a symbol, not of harm exactly, but of displacement. The mother-in-law didn't believe the bride was cruel. She didn't accuse her of being openly disrespectful. That would have been too obvious, too easy to challenge. Instead, she framed it as influence. "She doesn't do it directly," she told a relative, "but things change when a woman enters a man's life." In her mind, the bride didn't have to do anything wrong to be at fault. Her mere presence was enough. The first real confrontation came over something small. A family gathering was planned, nothing official, just dinner. The mother assumed it would happen at her house like it always had. Instead, her son mentioned casually that they were thinking of hosting it at the bride's parents' place because it was closer for everyone. The words stung. "Oh," she said, "so my house isn't convenient anymore?" Her son tried to laugh it off. He explained the logistics, the timing, the parking. She heard excuses. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, imagining future holidays, future events, future decisions where she would be considered last or not at all. She imagined herself aging quietly in the background while her son built a new life that didn't need her. Fear sharpened into anger. The next time money came up, she didn't hold back. "Do you know how much you're spending?" she asked him sharply. "For one day?" He told her again that it wasn't her money, that it was handled, that she didn't need to worry. That answer pushed something over the edge. "Of course it's not my money. It never is. But one day, when family needs you, will you have anything left?" There it was, the unspoken expectation finally finding air. He didn't respond right away. He looked tired, older than she remembered. Amy, we love you, but you can't make every decision about you." That sentence cracked something open. Tears followed, loud ones. Accusations poured out. She said she was being pushed aside. She said she was being isolated. She said the bride had turned him against her. And for the first time, she said after that word, stolen, nothing felt the same. The room had gone quiet, but the silence wasn't calm. It was heavy, stretched thin, like something about to tear. The bride sat frozen, unsure whether to defend herself or stay quiet. Every response she imagined sounded wrong in her head, too emotional, too defensive, too cold. The son felt it too, that sudden realization that this conversation had crossed a line it could never uncross. He had always known his mother struggled with change. He had always known she depended on him emotionally more than she admitted. But hearing her frame his marriage as theft forced him to see the situation clearly for the first time. This wasn't about hurt feelings. It was about control. He spoke carefully, slower than usual, choosing his words the way someone does when they know one wrong sentence could become a permanent scar. "No one stole me," he said. "I chose my life." That sentence landed like a shock, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. His mother stared at him, stunned. In her mind, choice had never factored into it this way. Children grew, yes, but they didn't choose away from their parents. They simply added things to their lives. What he was saying sounded like subtraction. She cried harder then, her voice breaking as old fears spilled out. "I gave everything to you," she said, "everything, and now I don't recognize my place in your life." For the first time, the bride spoke without trying to soften herself. "I'm not trying to take anything from you," she said quietly. "I just don't want to live my marriage feeling like I'm competing." That word, competing, hit differently because it named what everyone had been avoiding. The mother shook her head. "You don't understand. You didn't raise him." And in that moment, the bride realized something painful and important. No amount of respect would ever be enough if the expectation was submission. The conversation ended without resolution. No apologies, no agreements, just exhaustion. In the days that followed, the mother rewrote the story in her head. She told herself she had spoken out of emotion, that any mother would feel this way, that her son had been influenced, that the bride didn't understand family loyalty the way she did. She shared her version carefully with relatives. She didn't lie outright, she just emphasized certain details. How she was never consulted, how she felt excluded, how her son had changed, how the bride was very independent. That phrase, very independent, carried weight in her circle. It sounded polite, but it wasn't praise. Some relatives sympathized immediately. "She's still his mother," they said. "A wedding doesn't erase that. These girls don't know how much a mother sacrifices." Others stayed quiet. They had seen similar patterns before. They recognized the resentment that surfaces when a child stops centering their parent, financially, emotionally, socially, and the parent isn't ready for that shift. The mother noticed who took her side and who didn't. She stored that information away. Meanwhile, the couple adjusted. They stopped sharing details unless necessary, not out of spite, but out of self-protection. Every update became an invitation for criticism. Every decision became an argument. So they simplified. When asked questions, they gave brief answers. When guilt was implied, they didn't engage. When accusations surfaced, they didn't defend themselves endlessly. This change terrified the mother because silence felt like abandonment. She increased her efforts. More calls, more emotional statements, more reminders of the past.
You used to tell me everything. You used to listen. You never kept things from me before." Each sentence carried the same message: come back to who you were. But who he was then was someone who hadn't yet learned to separate love from obligation. The closer the wedding came, the more intense her anxiety grew. She imagined standing at the event feeling like a guest instead of a central figure. She imagined watching rituals where she had no role.
She did make her absence felt, but not in the way she imagined. On the day of the wedding, she arrived on time, dressed carefully, smiling politely, saying all the correct things. To anyone watching, she looked composed, dignified, even proud. But something had changed in how she carried herself. She no longer tried to insert herself into conversations. She no longer commented on decisions. She no longer asked questions she already knew the answers to. She watched instead. And as she watched, she realized something uncomfortable. The wedding went on without her involvement, and nothing fell apart. The rituals were completed, the guests were happy, the couple looked calm, connected, grounded in each other. The bride's family welcomed her respectfully. No one ignored her, no one pushed her away. They simply didn't orbit around her. And for the first time, she saw the truth she had been avoiding. She hadn't been excluded. She had been repositioned. Her son still greeted her with warmth, still checked on her comfort, still spoke to her with respect, but he no longer looked to her for approval before every step. He no longer hesitated when choosing his wife's side. He no longer apologized for building a life that didn't revolve around her needs. And the world didn't end. The loss she felt wasn't real abandonment. It was the loss of control she had mistaken for closeness. In the weeks after the wedding, the emotional storms softened, not because everything was resolved, but because reality had settled in. The marriage was done, the boundaries were real, the dynamic had shifted. She still felt pangs of resentment sometimes, still caught herself comparing, still mourned the version of motherhood where her son's life centered around her. But slowly she began to understand something painful and necessary. Love that demands priority becomes a burden. Sacrifice that expects repayment becomes a transaction, and inclusion that requires control isn't inclusion at all. Her son hadn't chosen money over her. He hadn't chosen another family over his own. He had chosen adulthood. And the bride hadn't stolen anything. She had simply joined a man who was finally allowed to belong to himself. The resentment didn't vanish overnight, but it stopped growing, because deep down, even she could see the truth she had been fighting. This wasn't a story about a mother being pushed out. It was a story about a mother being asked, quietly, firmly, to step back, and learning painfully that love doesn't disappear when you're no longer the center. It just changes shape.